Hello, Mhotep, and welcome to the Egyptian Magic Podcast. I'm Mog Morgan, companion of Set and Knight of Shambhala. For this episode, I'm talking about the very important Egyptian goddess Nuit, or Nut, whose sacred month we're about to enter. I'm actually going to play something that I recorded about a year ago, which I've re-edited for the podcast. So do please check out my various books where I write about her quite a lot, really, and contact me with any questions or feedback via the usual social media channels. So behind me, in lieu of visual aids, is um, is an image of Nuit, because tonight's short talk is on Nuit, or Newt. And Nuit, it kind of, we call it in the occult world, we kind of got used to calling it Nuit, really, but so I'm not going to get too uptight about that. I think it's probably all right. Anyway, this is an image which some of you might know. It's actually a shroud. Well, I say that. I screen printed that as a shroud on unbleached calico, kind of in the Egyptian flavour. And it's an image taken from inside a coffin, a very famous coffin, which you can go and see in London if you want, in the John Soane's Museum, the coffin of Seti I, he of Set. One of the masterpieces of the world, really. It's amazing. It's in such a small museum, not in the British Museum, but that's one of these stories. Anyway, that's an image that I've kind of copied from inside the coffin, and usually I do it in blue, but for some reason, and I had it, the edition, it's screen printed, this one's in black. But it is Nuit, and maybe you're more used to images of Nuit where she's kind of got outstretched wings. In this, her wings are kind of folded and wrapped around her body. To look as if she's got a dress, really, which, as we say, is a kind of bit unusual, actually, for Nuit to be wearing a dress. But it's there, so the rings are kind of wrapped around the body, really, of the deceased, and you can tell it's Nuit because on the top above her head her name is quite clearly written. Jess says he's met some Setians at the Soane Museum in 2010. Yeah, I mean, I guess it would also be a pilgrimage place for Setians, really, because of the amazing coffin of Seti I. It's a free museum as well, a rather wonderful museum. And the square it's in, I guess that's Lincoln's Inn Fields, is exactly the same footprint as the Great Pyramid, one of the Great Pyramids at Giza, Khufu, I guess. It's a kind of huge square. And on one side is this museum, and in the museum is the coffin of Seti I, so there's a kind of nice vibe, really. So I do recommend it. Anyway, I better crack on. I'm trying to tune in, but there's no sound or action. I think other people have got sound. So I don't know what to suggest. Action-wise, what am I going to do action-wise? Sound-wise, I'm talking to give people a chance, but some people can hear it and some people can't, I'm afraid. So I kind of, as far as I know, it's transmitting all right. Is this correct? Okay, so I'm going to crack on, otherwise we'll never finish. There's a lot of material. Mhotep, everybody. So I'm talking about Nuit, the star goddess. Over the years, I've kind of discovered I've written and researched quite a lot about her stuff. There's loads of it. In various books. Some of it probably repeat it because I like it. One of the things that kind of you get with Nuit is the issue of sexuality and sexual politics. Which of course is going to link us. This is the same with Set, really. Set kind of intersects with the issues of sex and sexuality and politics in quite a big way. They're very much tied up with all of their mythology. You know, there's an example, you know, even the way they kind of get at each other, they wound each other. Famously, the testicles of Set, which are wrenched off him by his brother Horus while they're fighting. And some people see that as a kind of political thing, really, kind of like taking their power in some ways. Okay, so what I should say, how this links Set into Newt is, you've got this thing. People in this book that's probably everybody's read by Tevelda, called Set, God of Confusion. He kind of is trying to persuade us, probably reasonable enough, that Set is the kind of sexual outlaw, really, in lots of ways, and he kind of, in the book, he kind of says some really quite startling things about Set. And one of them is that he says Set has an Oedipal complex. In a nutshell, he's kind of fixated on his mother, which happens to be the star goddess Newt. So this title he has, Son of Newt, is one of his most common titles, really, Son of Newt. More than any other gods, even though Newt gives birth to all the gods, it's a very Setian thing. So now for Tevelda, he kind of thinks this title, Son of Newt, it kind of makes Set it underlines the fact that Set is even more of a bad person, really, because he's Oedipal, he's fixated on his mother. I mean, I don't know, it's a kind of bit of a joke in a way, this, but anyway, it's interesting. So he's saying there's an unnatural relationship between Set and the goddess Newt, in some ways. Now you might think, well, there's this relationship between Horus and Isis as well. Why doesn't he say that's unnatural? But he doesn't. He thinks that's okay. That's fine. In fact, but if you look at the mythology of Horus and Isis, far more weird things go on in their mythology than they do between Newt and Set. But still, passing over that, you never get any stories about Set as a kind of child with his mother. That's one of the things. It's something else. Now, I think we could dispute this, right? But it is interesting to think about it, right? This relationship between Set and mother, or Newt and her son, her particular son, Set. Why is that so special? And they often appear together in. They often appear together in images in Egyptian temples, Set and his mother Newt as well. Often holding hands, almost like as a couple, as an auspicious couple, blessing people as they enter the temple. So this is obviously quite important. It's not always obvious, this, because of the thing about Set's mythology. Some of this stuff has been kind of carefully chiseled off the wall, right? So you have to do a bit of detective work. But it must have been obvious at first that you had to be blessed by this divine couple as you came in. I think one aspect of this is that Set has, even though Set is never a child deity, like as you get with other deities in mythology, like Horus is a child deity, he has this very surprising relationship with childbirth. He's a protector of childbirth. And of course Newt is the mother, the archetypal mother of all the gods, so it would kind of make sense for them to be connected in some ways, because Set protects the children and Newt gives birth to all the children. So I think I think the answer to the relationship between Set and Newt and why he is always called Son of Newt is probably lies in that, really. The fact that Set, even though he's a warrior deity and quite violent and passionate in some ways, he also has this compassionate side as a protector of children and mothers in the child room. So we come then to Newt, and obviously Set as well. He's very linked. He leads the stars in a way on this kind of motion through the heavens, which in a way is kind of the body of Newt as well. He's kind of traversing her body. So tonight, in fact, this week is a very appropriate time to be considering the goddess knew it, because we're a few days away from the winter solstice, when the sun god Ra is born, right? In fact, he's a kind of fetus at the moment within inside the body of Nuit, and he's about to be kind of born at the solstice. And the whole month really is, in the Egyptian system, if you follow it, if you revive it, is dedicated to the goddess Nuit. And it's almost a full moon as well. It's almost a full moon and the solstice coming up, so it's a very benign moment in which to be discussing the mythology of Set and Nuit, primarily Nuit. Okay, so I talked about her. I remembered in the book that I've just done called Finetta, which has got all sorts of goodies in it. You either think there's all sorts of goodies in this book, or you think that it's kind of got a lot of stuff in it that I've thrown together. But it sort of makes sense to me as a sort of diary. And, you know, I think as you know, I'm quite into Aleister Crowley. And there is a sort of weird thing about Crowley, that he did kind of lead us into this very interesting. I mean, I don't know if people were really interested in Nuit before Crowley, but maybe they were. But certainly, hello DT, certainly he kind of popularised that, and sort of led us into this idea. And, you know, in a way, Crowley often stumbled upon very, very interesting pieces of mythology in his work. Sometimes it's a little bit contrived, I admit, but sometimes he does lead us into some interesting spaces, because the sky goddess Nuit, who kind of figures such a lot, especially in the first chapter of the Book of the Law, which he kind of channeled in Egypt, and it's all about the goddess Nuit, really. I mean, it's weird that if you don't get Nuit, you should have Set, really. And if you're going to have Nuit, you should have Set, really. But maybe, of course, we believe Set is really there, right, sort of hidden in the background. So she's a very, very interesting goddess to have fixed upon for Crowley. Also, considering that I don't think he went to the main temples of the goddess Nuit, so it's a kind of spontaneous stuff. She's one of the very oldest deities of all. I suppose you say star goddesses are the oldest of all deities in any pantheon, but certainly in Egypt she's one of the oldest ones. She first appears almost before history, in the what we'd call the nameless era. So she's very, very old. And I thought she's so old that she kind of appears in what you would call a bovine form, as a cow, which, again, the cattle cult, that's from the Neolithic. That's really, really old. One of the oldest forms of religion is the cattle cult. And her in the pyramid texts, which is again the oldest religious text, she's one of these long-horned cattle, celestial cattle, which actually they come. Do you know they breed those in Oxford? You know, the ones that they have in America. Sorry, it's tangent. The ones with the long horns and in all the movies, they come from the field just down the road from me. They're actually Old English longhorns. Anyway, it says that the king said, "May Nuit the Great put her hands on him." That's the king when he said, "She has long horns and pendulous breasts," like a cow, I guess. But over time, she kind of gets this human form, which we're more familiar with. Now, in most mythologies of the world, the sky and the stars are male. They're always thought or personified as a male thing. And the counterpart of that would be the Earth Mother. But for some reason, I don't know, you tell me why, the personification of the sky in Egypt is, of course, female. It's Nuit. And that's, again, so this is a very interesting thing that Crowley hit upon that, right? Of all the goddesses in the world, he hits upon the one sky goddess that is female. Very, very unusual. Her name, it means literally the newt. It means from new. It means the watery one. So she represents the sky. I suppose the sky is thought of as kind of having a watery quality to it. As a kind of dynamic thing, the sky is a very dynamic thing in the Egyptian way of looking at the world. You know, it's very powerful. Someone said, "I've seen the Oxfordshire Longhorns many times." You see, Oxford is actually named after them. See, Oxford is where the original Oxford is. That's where those Old English Longhorns are actually kept, even now, as a kind of ritual thing. And they've gone all over the world. I don't know if they came from Egypt originally. They may have done. You know, they call the river Isis when it flows through Oxford for some strange reason. Perhaps Nuit then. Nuit, the female goddess of sky, she represents the high. She tells us that women had a very, very high status in ancient Egypt. Certainly, the further you go back, the status of women seems to get higher. It kind of goes downhill a little bit as everybody's world went downhill. All mythologies, if you go in any museum, you'll see this gradual decline in the status of the goddess. If you go through the cabinets in any museum in the right order, chronologically, you'll see this strange decline, and sometimes this kind of complete at the end. You know, there'd be nothing after a certain date. It's a very strange thing. So she's the image of the mother goddess in the sky, and we all return to her at death. So that's when we return to the sky. When we die, we return to the source, which means we return to the mother goddess in the sky, which is again what it's teaching us really. So she can resurrect the dead. She is the goddess who resurrects and brings the god back to life. And kind of is the representation of the womb, I suppose. So you might ask, who created her? You know, if did anybody create Nuit? Where did she come from? She's got parents apparently. She's the daughter of the first primary couple, the first, like the Adam and Eve in a way, which is Shu and Tefnut, which represent two very old binary oppositions, air and fire. So these two, Shu and Tefnut, are quite amorphous deities. And of course, famously, Nuit in later myth is married to the earth god Geb, who is the personification. So there you go. You got, instead of Earth Mother, you've got Earth Father, Geb, who's the personification of the earth. So, and because some people, it depends how you want to look at this. Some people think this kind of strange reversal, maybe it's almost like pushing the female principle away from the earth into the sky. Might be a bit of a perverse way of looking at it. Let's say her name. There's another old name, right, of a goddess like her. It can mean she could be related to Bart, which means the female soul and the female power. So this is all kind of interesting stuff, really. When you compare it with later stuff, you could call this almost tantric myth in some ways. So the largest representation of Nuit, indeed the largest representation of any deity in the whole of Egypt, are the ones found in the Temple of Hathor, the cow goddess at Dendera. They're really enormous. There's loads of them as well. There's several of them. They're really massive. So Dendera is the main cult center of the cow goddess Hathor. And so that underlines the fact Nuit doesn't have a temple just for herself. Maybe she doesn't need one. She's kind of just there in the sky. She sometimes have a little chapel or something. She's always represented in the temples, but she never seems to have her own temple just for her, which maybe you think is a strange thing. Someone says, I have to something or other. So you're going to catch up. You're going to catch up with me on YouTube, okay, because you can't get the sound. Sorry about that, but yeah, I will put this on YouTube later because it's kind of good material. But sometimes the technology lets us down a little bit. I mean, the other thing, as time went by, Nuit became part of what you would call the death cult, or the mortuary cult, really, in which she's the personification of the coffin, hence the shroud and the coffin image that I have behind me, which I'm going to stay centre camera, but it's there, you see, there's a coffin. So you can see from that, when you die within this way of looking at things, you're wrapped up in the womb of the star goddess Nuit, waiting to be reborn. So that tells you what people actually believe there. There's a kind of process of going to the stars and then being reborn. So that you have to be incubated, you have to live within the star goddess first. So there's a prayer, you know, which I often repeat and I've used a lot, which is, "Oh, my mother Nuit, stretch yourself over me that I may be placed amongst the imperishable stars which are in you, and thus I will not die." So the female sky then is the realm of the dead, where the earth, whereas the earth is where all the living are. We're on the earth, and the dead are in the sky, really, as the stars, which again is like the Crowley type thing. Every man and every woman is a star. It's a very Egyptian thought. I should sort of say that Nuit, one of the weird things, I don't know, it's weird things, but as well as being this colossal image of a goddess, she's almost always shown naked. See, perhaps one of the only goddesses within the Egyptian tradition that is routinely shown naked, completely naked, one way or another. I don't know if there are other examples of that, maybe kind of deity dancers or something like that. And that's obviously significant. Maybe because she's to do with birth, and maybe when you give birth, that's kind of where you are. And also, she's very, I can't say earthy, right? Because she's not earthy. It's very visceral. Her prayers and her images are very visceral. They're all about the body and the insides of the body and the realities of sexuality, really. It's very, very direct. So when they talk about the winding waterway and the nurse canal and the everything, it's really, they're talking about bits within the body. It's a very kind of body magic, really. And again, I think Crowley knew that. Crowley had intuited that. It's good, you know, give him credit where credit is due. And as I say, one of our most important links is this connection, which we've discussed already, with the god Set. So in this book, as I say, there are loads of different things to do with Nuit that what people could use for the solstice coming up. I mean, they're quite detailed, almost rituals in their own right, and I can't really go into them. I can't read them all here. I might put one of them on SoundCloud or something. But in the book, you see, where this coffin, in the temple of Seti the First at Abydos, they found this very strange text on the wall with a thing called the Book of Nuit. So she's got a whole book. It's not actually called the Book of Nuit. It's called the, sorry, I was stretching then, I went off camera. It's called the Book of the Fundamentals of the Stars. So as you would expect, a star goddess like Nuit, her writings are all about the mysteries of astronomy. the mysteries of the decans that people are studying now. That's all in her stuff. In different layers as well, you get kind of in this text that you'll find on the walls in one of the chambers at Abydos, underground in fact. You get a kind of decanal calendar, but then you get kind of archaic versions. You get really, really old versions of it as well. It's very mysterious in their own right. So the Book of Nuit, which I can't, it is sort of reproducing here, but I'm not going to read all of that out to you, but it is rather good. Rather good story about her rowing really with her husband, about the fact that she kind of eats her own children. Well, it was because the stars do in a way, right? Because stars come and go, right? So it's a kind of metaphor, but Geb being a little bit literal about these things, he doesn't completely understand why she eats her own children. So yeah, the book of Nuit is actually also reproduced in the. When I did find out, it was actually reproduced in the Wheel of the Year as a suggested ritual drama that goes with the solstice, in which they kind of, there's stars that sail out at night to the limits of the sky outside of my body, shine and be seen. In the daytime you sail inside of me and are not seen. Enter with the sun god Ra and go forth after him. So in a way that's when the sun is eaten, which is, I suppose that's like, in an older way of looking at it, to be eaten is conception, to go through the mouth, is the conception of the god, and that really is the equinox. But for the solstice, after 9 months of incubation in the body of Nuit, Ra is about to be reborn on the solstice itself. He's an embryo. He's about to kind of come out through the vagina of the goddess Nuit and to be born. And obviously we know Set has a kind of role in protecting that feat. This is why Set protects children. He protects Ra at the moment of birth. So he protects all children and all fetuses really. That's his cosmic role. It's underlined in mythology. It's not just an odd thing. It's underlined in mythology over and over again. So, and this is an extremely old piece of mythology as well, far older than any written text in Egypt. And again, it's very strange that there are these secret books that are kind of written on the walls of some of these royal temples that people kind of didn't really understand for a long time. So for the solstice, when the sun is being born, the text that I kind of suggest for that is a thing called the Book of Gates. And various people have done versions of this now. Mine was one of the first actually for occultists, but I'm just saying. But other people have kind of cottoned on to this. That these were magical books. They're not like the Book of the Dead, which is kind of in a way more popular. These were kept more secret, and people only knew about them because when we dug them up in a way, or we found them on the walls of people's tombs, where they weren't designed to be known. So it's a night journey. The final night before the solstice, the sun is still an embryo. He's battling his way through the hours of the underworld to be born on the solstice morning. And there's a kind of long text called the Book of Eight Gates, which takes you through the 12 gates of the underworld. And the various serpents that sometimes threaten and sometimes help the soul, which is Ra, traverse through the body of Nuit to get to the doors of the horizon, which is her sexual canal, really. And some people, obviously there's a kind of tragic bit as well, because as they go, there are all sorts of spirits that are kind of trapped in the underworld and never get out. And for a brief moment the sun shines on them and they kind of warms them up, and then the doors are closed again and they kind of cry. It's a kind of horrible scene in a way, that the souls of the dead spirits, they kind of cry because they're left behind. They're not going to be reborn. So do go out, and there's such a lot of stellar lore taking place this month, right, around this period. There are all sorts of things that I could say and have already happened to do with this mythology, but certainly the solstice is a key moment for the goddess Nuit, and for those of us who are interested in Set as well. So I'll just read a little bit of the final bit, really. After your long night, the final gate is here. She whose power is holy, 2 pillars with human heads appear. They face each on each. Atom, the setting sun, Kephra rising, the coming, so the beginning is with the end. And through the twin doors of the horizon, it is the dawn, when holy serpents fly and 2 cobras will rest. Isis and her sister Nephthys, those who light for Ra, going after this god into the mysterious door of the west. So your mind says to the serpent at the door, the one of the morning, you who open for Ra, open the gate. Throw open the door for the one of the horizon, for he comes out of the mysterious regions to rest upon the body of Nuit. And mind says to the encircler, you upon the door, open the gate for Ra, open for the one of the horizon, for he comes out of the mysterious regions to move over the body of Nuit. And so you and the gods sail through on the winding waterway, and the great door closes one last time that makes the dead souls wail. So come out into the light and contemplate death and rebirth, the eternal sun told by the 8 gods of the earth. And on the sunboat of the morning, lifted by the abyss, the abysmal waters surging up from the faraway world, Kephra, the sacred scarab, as a new sun is born through the eastern mountains, Isis and Nephthys bearing him up to the waiting goddess of the sky, who stands above the earthly sphere, out of the old and into the new, so you are lifted into her arms, mother of the gods, Nuit.